Okay, so we're going to be going through chapter 3 of this book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Can we turn them off?
Light couldn't be dimmed down. If you prefer, we can just switch it off.
Yeah, please switch it off. Is that okay? Do you mind? Phew. Okay. Ooh. Now I know all the people who watch the video are going to complain. Oh, why didn't they turn the light on? We can't see the video very well. So I'm going to ask all those people please to have compassion for me. Okay? Okay. So, actually this book is all about compassion, so good topic. Okay, so this book, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, it was written by Shantideva, a great Indian sage of the 8th century. And he wrote it as a guide for people who wanted to practice the path to full enlightenment. In other words, for people who wanted to develop their love and compassion and their altruistic intention so that they could be of the greatest benefit to all living beings. And so he wrote this book with those people in mind. So the book is based on having love and compassion and an altruistic intention for living beings. So I want to just spend a little bit of time describing how to develop love and compassion, because we can't just say, I'm going to love everybody, or I'm going to have compassion for people. You know, we can't just say that and then all of a sudden our mind has love and compassion. You know, in the same way as when you're angry, you can't just say, well, I'm going to stop being angry, and then the anger goes away. You know, instead what we have to do is really learn methods. Like if we're angry, we have to learn methods of how to think so that we can let go of the anger. And if we're going to develop love and compassion, we have to learn the methods of how to think so that we can develop love and compassion. Okay? It's not just a thing of telling ourselves what we're going to feel. Okay? So to develop love and compassion, first of all, we have to understand what they are. Yeah? So the definition of love from a Buddhist perspective is wishing somebody to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And compassion is wishing them to be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. Okay. Now it sounds easy, but when we say we want others to be happy, what is this happiness we want them to have? Or when we say that we want ourselves to be happy, what is the happiness that we're wanting to have? And my own opinion, when I look around, you know, we all want happiness and we all want to be free of suffering, but we don't really understand what happiness and misery are very well. Because sometimes in our efforts to be happy, we actually do the things that make us miserable. Yeah? Do you do that in your life? Can you see that happening sometime in your life? For example, sometimes you might have a very good friend and there was a misunderstanding between you and your friend. And what you really want is to be close to that person, but the way you act is you get angry and you don't talk to them and you just accuse them of being inconsiderate. But actually what you want to do is be close to them, but the way you're acting is pushing them away. Can you see that sometimes? Yeah? Or Another example is we want to be happy and we want people to trust us, but we don't act in a trustworthy way. We may lie or deceive others or something like that. And get the sensation of the Buddha shining behind me. Okay, so we want others to trust us, and yet we might lie to them or act in a deceptive way because we're being quite greedy. So again, the way we're acting is not giving other people the chance to trust us. It's actually making them think that we're not trustworthy. Okay? So that's what I mean by we want happiness, but we don't always know what the causes of happiness are. And we're all sometimes not very clear on exactly what happiness is. Because there's many layers of happiness, many types of happiness. There's the happiness that comes from eating a good meal. But how long does that happiness last? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, as long as the meal lasts, until you begin to get really full. And then the more you eat, instead of getting happier and happier, you begin to have a stomach ache. Yeah? So what was supposed to bring you happiness, eating, now all of a sudden brings you a stomach ache because you ate too much. So there's that kind of happiness. There's the happiness of having friends and close relationships with others. But then sometimes the people we're very close to, we don't get along with, or sometimes we separate from them. Eventually, either they're going to die or we're going to die. And so if we think that all of our happiness in life comes from relationships, we're going to have a rough time with it, because relationships are always changing, and there's separation that happens very naturally. Okay? So what we discover is that there's a certain kind of happiness that comes from external people and things, but that happiness tends to be rather short-lived, and it doesn't tend to be very stable, and we always can't have power over it, because it depends on external things that we don't have control over. Because, we're always trying to control everyone and everything in our environment, but it's absolutely impossible to do that. Okay? And so that's why that kind of happiness that depends on external things, it's really unstable and doesn't bring anything lasting. It's a quite insecure kind of happiness, because we're always afraid that we're going to lose what we have, or that the external thing that we have is going to end, or it's going to leave, or something like that. Okay? So happiness from external sense objects, it's okay, but it's not so reliable. Yeah. It's what tends to be more reliable is happiness that comes from inside. In other words, when we have a kind heart, when we have a clear conscience because we've acted with ethical integrity, yeah? When our mind is very calm because it's free of anger, that kind of happiness lasts longer. And that's a kind of happiness that we actually can have some power over, because we can learn how to subdue our mind, how to manage our mind, how to change our emotions and our moods, so that we don't have to be at the whim of whatever emotion or thought happens to pop into our mind at any particular time. And so when we wish for beings to have happiness, let's think not only of the the happiness that comes from external things, but especially the happiness that comes from inside. And the happiness that comes from inside, from having a kind heart, a free conscience, and mental stability and concentration and so on, that happiness can be developed infinitely. And that kind of happiness can lead us to the state of liberation, which is freedom from the cycle of constantly recurring problems that we call samsara. And that happiness can be developed to its utmost in the state of the full enlightenment of a Buddha. Okay? So when we're saying that we want happiness, don't just think, oh, I want to have, nice noodles to eat every day, okay? Because that's low-grade happiness, We want high-grade happiness, don't we? Who wants low-grade? Everybody in Singapore wants the best. Yeah, you're a developed country, so you want to be the best and have the best brand. So you really aim for the best brand of happiness. But you can't buy that happiness. Okay, that kind of happiness is something cultivated in your own heart. Okay, it's the happiness that comes through following the Buddha's teachings. And so that's why we come here, to really learn what the Buddha's teachings are and learn how to practice them and integrate them in our mind. Okay. So in Buddhism, we wish for happiness for ourselves and others. Okay, so we love ourselves and others. Yeah, and loving ourselves is quite important. Now I know in a lot of modern self-help books, do people here read self-help books? Are they popular here? In the States, they're quite popular. And everybody every year has some new method, Yeah. But all the self-help books talk about loving yourself. But I'm not sure that they really understand properly what loving ourselves means. Because again, when we want ourselves to be happy, like some of them say, well, love yourself and go out to the shopping center and buy yourself a treat, buy yourself a present. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but I know a lot of people, if they go to the shopping center and buy themselves a present, they get in more credit card debt. Yeah. And that's not happiness, that's suffering. So how is buying yourself a present loving yourself if you're just making yourself feel more pressured because you don't have enough money to pay for all these things that you got that the next day you forgot you got, and they don't bring you any happiness the next day? Okay? So I think that when we really love ourselves and want ourselves to be happy, we'll want ourselves to have a kind heart. Because I think when we have a kind heart, then we're happy and other people are happy. Don't you think so? When you think for a minute in the times of your life when you were the happiness. Think back in your life. When were you the happiest? And doesn't it usually have to do with having a kind heart and having affectionate feelings and kind feelings towards other people? Doesn't it usually have something to do with that? Or feeling happy, doesn't it also have to do with feeling your own sense of self-respect, your own sense of integrity, because you've done what the right thing is to do? Okay? So if we really look and think what happiness is, we want to cultivate that inner happiness for ourselves, and we want to be able to aid other living beings in cultivating that inner happiness as well. Then, compassion is wishing living beings to be free from suffering in its causes. And again, I'm not so sure that we really understand what suffering is very well. There's some suffering that we understand, like when we're hurt, or when we're sick, or when somebody, when we're hurt by what somebody else said. There's that kind of pain. And even animals recognize that as pain. Even dogs, if you scold a dog, they feel hurt. Or if they get hit by a rock, they feel hurt. So that level of pain and misery, everybody can identify. But there's other levels of what we call suffering that isn't the ouch kind of suffering. It isn't like, oh, you got hit, so ouch. It's a different kind of unsatisfactory experience. So the example I gave before of when you eat and when you start eating, you feel happiness, but if you continue eating for a while, you get a stomach ache. Okay? So that whole situation of eating going from happiness and changing into pain, that whole situation is unsatisfactory, isn't it? Because you can't rely on eating to give you constant pleasure. At some point, it's going to give you pain. So we look in our lives, there are many things like that we do initially wanting happiness, but if we keep doing that activity, then we wind up experiencing pain. So for example, when you first get a new job, you went to the interview and they called you and they say that you're hired, then you feel, oh, I'm so happy. I got hired. I can work for this company. Okay. And then you start working for the company and it's kind of okay. But then after a while you realize there's all this politics in the office. Yeah. And people are jealous of each other and people compete with each other. And so this job that you used to really have a lot of fondness and satisfaction for, all of a sudden becomes not so interesting anymore. And then you think, oh, well, all I really need is a promotion. If I get a promotion, then I'll be happy, because then I won't have all this office politics and stuff that's going on now. So I'll just get a promotion. And then you get the promotion, and then you're so happy because you have the promotion. But then what you realize is not only do you make more money, but you have to work longer hours. So now you have the total pleasure of working 10-hour days or 12-hour days. And all of a sudden, this promotion that you thought was going to bring you happiness, it brings me more trouble in my life. So we begin to see that some of the things that we're quite attached to, that we think if we have, we'll be happy, actually, when we have, we aren't so happy. Okay. So that's what I meant when I said that sometimes we don't really understand what unsatisfactory circumstances are. There's another kind of unsatisfactory circumstance that the Buddha spoke of, and that is just having a body, and like we do at present, that are under the control of ignorance and tainted karma. So you're going to say, huh? Yeah, what does that mean? Okay, well, we have a body and a mind, right? Is our body under our control? Can you make your body not get sick? Can you make your body not age? Has anybody been able to make it so that their body didn't die? You know? So here we are with this body that we've been born into, and we're never separated from it, but we really can't control it in some very important aspects, and eventually, you know, our consciousness is going to separate from the body. And we also have a mind, but we can't control our mind very well either. How many of you, when we did the meditation on the breath, didn't have a distraction? Anybody who wasn't distracted during that meditation? I think maybe the only way you weren't distracted is if you fell asleep. Yeah, but that's not meditating, that's sleeping. Yeah. So even our mind, you know, it's hard for us to manage our mind. You know, we're born in what's called cyclic existence, taking one body and mind after another, taking one life after another. But we're not born out of our own free will. We're born under the impetus, propelled by our ignorance, propelled by our craving and clinging, pushed by our previous actions, our previous karma. So that's another level of suffering or unsatisfactory experience that we want to be free of. Very often, we aren't even aware of that. You know, we don't even question it. Oh, I have a body and mind, so what? You know, and we just think like, well, what else is there? But if we really examine and think, wow, from beginningless time, I've been taking rebirth, okay? I've been born, got sick, getting old and dying, and then again getting born and sick and old and dying, and again doing it, and again doing it. And we've been doing this under the force of ignorance from beginningless time. Doesn't seem like a very good situation, does it? So this is when we have very strong compassion for ourselves and others, what we're really wanting, the misery we're wanting ourselves to be free of, is not just the misery of getting sick or the misery of, our friend being upset with us. Okay? But it's also just having this situation of having a body and mind that we can't control, that are operated by ignorance and karma. When we have that kind of compassion and love for ourselves that understands what happiness and suffering are on a deeper level, then what we really want for ourselves, our highest aim in life, becomes liberation from cyclic existence, and it becomes having a kind heart and, a clear conscience. In other words, attaining liberation, attaining enlightenment. Okay? So this is just something to think about. We're stretching our mind and our understanding of what our life is about here. So we begin by wanting ourselves to have happiness and be free of suffering. But also, we look around in the world, and here's everybody else, yeah? And all these other living beings want to be happy just like we do. and they want to be free of suffering just like we do. And there's not anything special about us that makes our happiness more important or our suffering more painful. When we really look at it, you know, ourselves and others, we're totally equal, aren't we? And even when we look at friends, enemies, and strangers, you know, we might be more attached to our friends and have a lot of resentment towards our enemies and be indifferent towards strangers. But actually, are those emotions, do they make sense? Isn't everybody basically the same on one level? Everybody wanting happiness, nobody wanting pain? Yeah? We're all exactly the same in that way. So whether somebody likes us or whether we like them, we're still equal in wanting happiness and not suffering. So when we look at things this way, you know, our usual minds of attachment and hatred and apathy, we realize that we have to do something about those mental states because they're very unrealistic and they're very damaging. Don't you agree? Yeah? When we have a lot of partiality, oh, this person is so wonderful. That person is so terrible. You know, the third person, who cares? Yeah? You know, most people have those three emotions, and will go up and down in our daily life according to what emotion we happen to be feeling at any particular moment. You know, somebody gives us a present. Oh, I love them. The next day, they criticize us. I can't stand them. Yeah. The third day, we don't even think of them. Who cares? Yeah. So emotionally, we're like emotional yo-yos, aren't we? You know the children's toy, the yo-yo, up and down, up and down, up and down. Emotionally, we're like yo-yos. Oh, somebody's nice to me, I love them. Somebody's not nice to me, I hate them. Somebody doesn't do anything to me, you know, somebody's nice to me, they gave me a present, they praised me, my best friend, yeah. Then the next day, they criticize me. They take something that's mine without asking. You know, can't stand that person. I want my revenge. We're like that, aren't we? Yeah. Really, we're quite stupid. Don't you think? Yeah? Really, totally fickle. People usually say women are fickle. I disagree. Men are just as fickle as women, you know. You're just as much emotional yo-yos, yeah? Aren't you? All the guys are sitting there. All the women are going, Okay. So, you know, when we look at things through this perspective, we realize that in getting attached to people, having aversion, being apathetic, that our mind is really not being very realistic. Yeah, that we have to lessen these three emotions and instead really see that everybody's equal. Friend, enemy, and stranger are equal, and also we're equal with them. Okay. Now, how do we develop that? How do we do that? I think one way of doing it is just by seeing how much of a yo-yo our mind is. Yeah. And so when our mind starts to, go up and get involved with attachment, than to say, but that's just another sentient being, and, at some other time they're going to do something I don't like, so there's no sense in getting attached to them. Yeah, and we let go of the attachment. Or there's somebody else that we don't like because they harmed us, then to remember, but at another time, that very same person helped me. If not in this life, then in a previous life. Or they will help me in a future life. So why be angry at them? It doesn't make much sense. And then towards the person that we're apathetic towards, all the people that we push aside when we're getting on the bus, all the strangers, me first, I want to get on. Yeah. Then to realize, well, at some time in our previous lives, these people have been kind to us. At some times they have harmed us, So it doesn't make any sense to be indifferent because, they also have feelings. They want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. Yeah. So we train our mind like this. Yeah. And it takes a lot of habituation, a lot of effort on our part to retrain our mind so that our approach towards other living beings is different and is more stable, more of a mind of equanimity. Okay? And that mind of equanimity, it isn't a mind that's detached, like, oh, well, I don't love you and I don't hate you, so I just keep you at a distance. It's not like that. It's the mind of equanimity still has open-hearted concern for others, but we don't play favorites towards people. Okay? We see everybody as equal, and so we want everybody to be happy. We want everybody, ourselves and others, people we like and people we don't like, to be free of suffering. Yeah? So we have to deliberately, conscientiously cultivate these kinds of emotions and attitudes. So this is a very kind of a good meditation to do when you're in public places. Yeah, how many of you ride the bus every day? Yeah, or take the MRT? Yeah, or stop at red lights in your car? Yeah. So, we have this experience every day of being amidst many other living beings. Now, rather than just spacing out when we're traveling, yeah, and just ignoring other people and ignoring the circumstance or daydreaming or whatever, how about looking at all the other people who are around us and thinking, oh, that person wants to be happy just like me, and that person wants to be free of suffering just like me. It's an excellent opportunity to think like this. When you're sitting on the bus, look at all the people around you. Or when you're sitting on the MRT, look at everybody. And instead of having a mind that's very judgmental with all your opinions about them, look at them and think, oh, they want to be happy just like me. They want to be free of suffering just like me. Yeah? It's a very, very powerful way to think. When you're standing in line somewhere, because we spend, time each day probably standing in line, then look at the people ahead of you in the line and think they want to be happy and be free of suffering just like me. Yeah? It's very powerful. And this is a very, very good way to bring your spiritual practice into your daily life. Okay, so that's a little bit of an introduction. Each evening I'll give some kind of explanation like this as a way of giving you some background on the text. And then now I'll start on chapter 3. So I think you have the handout for it. So in chapter 1, we learned about the benefits of bodhicitta, okay, the benefits of this mind aspiring for full enlightenment, for the benefit of all beings. And in the chapter 2, we started the process of preparing our mind to generate this bodhicitta, this spirit of awakening, or this altruistic intention. And in chapter 2, it taught the practices of making offerings to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha as a way of creating merit, because merit enriches our mind. Merit is like fertilizer in a field. Yeah, if you put fertilizer in a field and then you plant seeds, the seeds are going to grow better. So similarly, when we make offerings and we do other activities that create merit, then when we plant the seeds in our mind by listening to the Dharma, it's easier for those seeds to grow and become realizations, spiritual realizations. Okay, so chapter 2 talked about making offering, and it also talked about confessing our misdeeds and our mistaken actions. Because all of us have made mistakes. We've all done things that we regret having done. And it's very important to clear our conscience of these things so that we don't walk around our whole lifetime carrying a lot of guilt and regret and remorse with us. Okay? So that previous chapter taught the practice of revealing our mistakes, admitting that we have them, making a determination to try and avoid them again, generating positive feelings towards whoever it was that we acted in a harmful way, and then engaging in some kind of remedial behavior as a way of kind of making up for what we did. Okay? So those 4 points, the regret, determination not to do it, transforming our attitude towards the ones that we harmed. So that would be either taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha if we harm the holy beings, or generating love and compassion if we harmed ordinary beings. And then the 4th of these 4 opponent powers is some kind of remedial action, which could be prostrations, making offering, printing Dharma books for free distribution, meditating, volunteering, doing service work at a charity, at a hospice, at an old folks' home, doing something, some kind of virtuous activity. Okay, so chapter 2 talked about those kinds of preliminary practices that help to fertilize our mind and clear away some of the obstacles. The beginning of chapter 3, okay, continues with this process of creating merit and purifying the mind. Okay, and then as chapter 3 goes on, then we really begin to cultivate love and compassion more, and eventually the full awakened mind, the full bodhicitta. But the initial verses here of this chapter are, again, helping us to create merit and purify our mind. Okay. Before I begin with the first verse here, some of you have heard about the 10 vows of Samantabhadra. You know, what's the name of Samantabhadra in Chinese? Puxian? Yeah, Puxian Pusa. Okay? So Puxian Pusa has 10 vows, and many of these practices that are described here are part of the 10 vows of that Bodhisattva. Okay? So bowing, you know, prostrating, paying homage to the Buddha, making offering, revealing our mistaken actions, those already are the first 4 of that Bodhisattva's 10 vows. So now we're going to continue with some of the other of the vows of Puxian Pusa. Excuse my Chinese, it's not very good. Okay. So verse 1, it says, I happily rejoice in the virtue of all sentient beings, which relieves the suffering of the miserable states of existence. May those who suffer dwell in happiness. Okay? So this starts a number of verses that are the practice of rejoicing, which is the 5th of the 10 vows of Puxian Pusa. Okay? So rejoicing. Yeah. So here at the beginning, the first verse, we're rejoicing in the virtue of all sentient beings. A sentient being is any being who has consciousness or mind who is not yet a fully enlightened Buddha. Okay? So sentient beings include ordinary beings like us. Sentient beings also includes arhats, and it includes bodhisattvas. Yeah? So we're rejoicing at all the virtue, all the positive deeds in the past, in the present, and in the future, created by all these sentient beings. And all of that virtue, all those positive deeds, it functions to relieve our suffering, and in particular, to relieve the suffering of unfortunate rebirths. Okay? So right now we're born in the human realm. This is considered a fortunate rebirth. But then there's lower rebirths too. There's the realm of the animals. Okay? There's the realm of the hungry ghosts and the realm of the hell beings. And those are considered lower rebirths. And different beings are born there pushed by the power of their negative karma, of their mistaken actions and harmful deeds. Okay? So what we're doing here is we're rejoicing at all the virtuous actions of ourself and others, and these virtuous actions which specifically prevent ourselves and others from being born in these miserable states of existence, as a hell being, a hungry ghost, or as an animal. So that's something to rejoice at, isn't it? When people do virtuous activities, that's going to bring them a fortunate rebirth. We should rejoice at that. Yeah? All the time, you know, especially when we send each other New Year's cards, you know, Chinese New Year's cards. Everybody's saying, you know, have a happy new year, and may you always have happiness, and may everything good happen to you. So that's a practice of rejoicing. So here we're particularly rejoicing in people's virtuous activities. Okay? So in them they're having a kind heart, doing kind deeds, restraining themselves from doing harmful deeds. Okay, so we're rejoicing in all these virtuous activities. And then we're also saying, may those who suffer dwell in happiness. So any living beings there are who are suffering, who do have these unfortunate rebirths, may they quickly be freed from them, and may their previously created good karma now ripen so that they can have good rebirths. Okay? This practice of rejoicing is a very nice practice because if you do it, it really makes your mind happy. Okay? So, you know how sometimes we feel kind of depressed? Whenever you feel depressed, rejoicing is a very good meditation to do because it makes your mind happy. Yeah? How does it make your mind happy? Because you start thinking of all the goodness there is in the world. So just think today, think of, just take our planet. I mean, planet Earth is just one tiny, tiny place in this whole universe. But even in our planet, think of how many beings have been kind to each other today. Have you experienced kindness from other people today? We've all received kindness today, haven't we? We ate food, and that food was grown by other people. We have friends and family who are kind to us. We have well, I don't, but you have probably a boss who pays you. Okay, that's kindness. So we receive kindness, If you're working in your office, you work in a team and you help each other. In a family, you work together, you help each other. In a neighborhood, you work together and you help the neighbors. So much during our life, we receive kindness and we also give kindness. And this is something very important to realize, because so often in our life, we just focus on the things that are the lack of kindness, or we focus on the harmful things. And just looking at life that way is, it's not very realistic, because there's not only harm in life, there's also a lot of goodness, okay? I remember one time the Dalai Lama was teaching in Seattle, where I lived at that time, and he was talking to the journalists in particular, to the media people, and he said to them, "Oh, you people are very, you do a lot of good work, because if somebody is cheating somebody else, or if there's corruption, or dishonesty," he said, "you sniff it out, and then you let other people know, and then that person has to stop their bad behavior." So you said, you're very good with that. But then he went on and he said, "But you also always report all the negative things that happen in the day." Because if we look at the headlines of the newspaper, usually they're about harmful actions, aren't they? And usually it's about tragedies. Somebody killed somebody else, or, there was somebody lied, some businessman did a bad deal, or, there's all sorts of things, bad things that they put on the front page of the newspaper. And when we listen to the news also, so much of negative. And I think that really adversely affects us and can make us have a feeling of great despair and even depression. Because when all we hear is about negative things, then that's all we think exists in the world. But that's not all that exists in the world. There's also an incredible amount of goodness. And so this practice of rejoicing is training our mind to look at the goodness that there is. Okay? So, somebody may have gotten hurt in a traffic accident, but how many people at the hospital work to save their life? Yeah? So many people at the hospital, the doctors, the nurses, common citizens who donated blood. So many people work to help save that person's life. Yeah. So when we look, we really have to think about the goodness there is. And you may have had a hard day at your job, and maybe somebody, said something mean in the office, but then look at all the other colleagues who tried to help each other and who spoke kindly about each other or kindly to each other. Okay? So we really have to train our mind to see the goodness that there is and not just focus on the negative. Yeah, that's very, very important. So that's what this practice of rejoicing is doing. Yeah. The practice of rejoicing also is an antidote to jealousy. Because when we're jealous, we don't want people to have happiness. Yeah. It's like, may you have suffering. Yeah, you got the promotion, I didn't, may you suffer. Actually, you should say, you got the promotion, I'm so happy you get to work overtime. I get to go home and relax. Okay. So the practice of rejoicing can be very good as a way to overcome jealousy. Okay, let's go on to verse 2. It says, I rejoice in sentient beings' liberation from the suffering of the cycle of existence, and I rejoice in the protectors, Bodhisattvahood and Buddhahood. Okay, so when it says I rejoice in sentient beings' liberation from the suffering of cyclic existence, what we're rejoicing at is all the sentient beings who were once ordinary, confused beings, who have attained liberation, who have become arhats, who have eliminated the mental afflictions from their mind stream, and who are no longer pushed by karma and afflictions to take one rebirth after another. They're free from the ocean of cyclic existence. So we rejoice how wonderful it is that they're free. Because it is wonderful, isn't it? We may not have freed our own mind yet because we were too busy sleeping to practice the Dharma, but some beings stayed awake and practiced the Dharma, and they're liberated, and isn't that wonderful? So we rejoice. And then it also says, I rejoice in the protectors, Bodhisattvahood and Buddhahood. By protectors, we're talking here specifically about the Buddhas, but we could also include the Bodhisattvas, and they're called protectors. The Buddhas are called protectors because they protect us by giving us the Dharma teachings. Yeah. So, we usually think of a protector as, somebody big and strong with a stick who's going to beat up anybody who tries to hurt us. But, that kind of protector can't protect us for very long, because that protector also has a body and somebody can hurt them. But the real beings who protect us are the Buddhas, because they teach us the Dharma, so they're giving us the tools by which to liberate our own mind. And that kindness of the Buddhas to give us the teachings is something that is the greatest kindness, actually, that we ever receive from anybody. Because our parents are kind to us, but our parents don't know how to attain liberation. They can't teach us the way to enlightenment, but the Buddhas can, and they do. Okay? So that's why they're called protectors. They protect us from the suffering of cyclic existence. So we rejoice at their being bodhisattvas. Bodhisattvas are those beings who have the intention to attain full enlightenment. so that they can help others and themselves most effectively. And so bodhisattvas are like people who are training to be Buddhas. Okay? Buddhas are the graduates. Yeah. Everybody else is, taking their O levels or something. Yeah. So we rejoice at their spiritual realizations. We rejoice at their kind actions and how they reach out to benefit other living beings. So again, that makes our heart very happy to think of the great deeds of the holy beings. Because when we do that, we remember that we're in a universe where there are many holy beings. We're not stuck in a universe just filled with a lot of negativity, but there are holy beings who, we can contact and who will lead us on the path to enlightenment. Okay, then verse 3, I rejoice in the teacher, oceanic expressions of the spirit of awakening, which delight and benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so when it says the spirit of awakening, that's how this translator translated bodhicitta, the Sanskrit word bodhicitta. I usually translate bodhicitta as the altruistic intention. But some people call it the spirit of awakening or the awakening mind. There's many different translations. Sometimes it's easier just to say bodhicitta and use the Sanskrit word. Okay? But here we're saying that we really rejoice at their altruistic intention. Because in their most fervent wish is to be of benefit to all living beings and to lead all of us to full enlightenment. And that's such an incredible, noble intention, isn't it? When you consider that we usually just think about how we can be happy ourselves, then to think that there's beings who have such compassion for all living beings and wish us to have the great happiness of enlightenment, not just the little happiness of some good food. Okay? So we're really rejoicing in their compassion, in their altruistic intention, because that altruistic intention delights and benefits all sentient beings, because we all, derive some benefit from the works of the holy beings. Okay? So these 3 verses are the practice of rejoicing. Yeah? So I want to pause here for today and open it to questions and comments. And then tomorrow I'll start on verse 4, which goes on to some of the other practices of Pusyen Pusa. So you can write your questions if you like, or you can raise your hand and speak out. Yes?
Venerable, I'm referring to the chapter 3, verse 3, about this oceanic expression. Here. Below, you are referring at oceanic virtue.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Verse 3.
Yes. The
Oceanic
expressions,
okay.
Yeah.
Below 49, Tibetan is oceanic virtue, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So I'm saying that the expression can be the wisdom. Can it known as the wisdom truth instead of virtue?
Okay, okay. So you're saying, can oceanic virtue include wisdom? I think so. Why not? I think virtue specifically usually refers to the method aspect of the path, which are the compassionate deeds. But I think you can include wisdom in virtue too, because wisdom is definitely a virtuous mental state. So if somebody has an abortion, what should they do to ensure that the unborn child has a good rebirth? I think the best thing to do is to make prayers for that child and wish them well, and do virtuous activities, make offerings, and cultivate love and compassion and so on, and dedicate the merit from those virtuous activities towards the child. Of course, the best way to ensure that unborn child has a good rebirth is not to have the abortion, and to let it be born and have the precious human, have a human life now. But if somebody does make that decision to have an abortion, then it's good if they do some purification practice afterwards, because abortion is considered taking life. And it's good that they do some virtuous activities and dedicate it for the good rebirth of the child. And also, I think, to be able to pray that in future lives, when you encounter the future continuum of that being, that you are able to meet in different circumstances and have a good relationship, so that there's no harm that occurs between you. And so really wish that person to have a good rebirth and meet teachers and have conducive circumstances for practicing the Dharma, so they can attain the realizations of the path. Okay, other questions? Yes?
Venerable, thank you very much for your presentation. It was very good, inspiring, touched my heart. I just want to know, which is more important, wisdom or compassion? The heart and the mind. And also, a fellow Buddhist brother was saying, both the Buddha and the beggar have no possessions. So, and both are homeless. So, what is the difference between a beggar and the
Buddha.
wonderful Buddha?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's two questions here. What was your first question again? I started thinking about the beggar and the Buddha, and I lost your first. Oh, wisdom and compassion. Okay, got it. Okay, beggar, Buddha, wisdom, compassion. Got to remember. Okay. So you asked which is more important, wisdom or compassion. They're both important, okay? To attain the full enlightenment of a Buddha, we need both, okay? We need compassion because it's the root of the virtuous intention, and that virtuous intention of bodhicitta is what's going to give us the energy and the umph to create the merit and develop the wisdom that will eventually lead us to full enlightenment. So compassion is important as a motivation, and wisdom is important because it's actual wisdom, the wisdom that realizes emptiness, that enables us to purify both the afflictive obscurations from our mind and the cognitive obscurations from our mind. The afflictive obscurations are the ones that keep us stuck in cyclic existence. So there are mental afflictions and the tainted karma. And And the cognitive obscurations are the subtle stains on our mind that are like the imprints of the ignorance and the craving and so on. And they prevent us from seeing both conventional truths and ultimate truths simultaneously and clearly. So it's the wisdom that raises thusness, or things as they are, that is the actual thing that purifies the defilements from our mind. So you see, we need both the wisdom and compassion. So it's often said to be like a bird needs two wings. Okay, a bird can't just fly with one, it needs both. So we need both wisdom and compassion. Okay, and then your second question is, both a Buddha and a beggar are homeless and don't have possessions. So what's the difference between them? Well, if the beggar is somebody who is an ordinary sentient being, because a beggar could also be a Buddha, but let's say the beggar is an ordinary sentient being, then the difference between them is that the beggar doesn't have the spiritual realizations and the Buddha does. And so a beggar, because they lack realizations, is usually unhappy about being homeless or poor, whereas a Buddha is still perfectly happy. Their own sense of inner well-being isn't adversely affected by poverty. How does turning a prayer wheel help us reach enlightenment faster? Okay. There's many ways of creating virtue. And one way, the Tibetans have this thing of prayer wheels, okay? So turning the prayer wheel itself, is not particularly virtuous. It's what you're thinking about while you turn the prayer wheel that is important. Because if you just sit there and turn this wheel and you're thinking, how can I make more money? And how can I get revenge for the person who insulted me? And how can I'm really better than everybody else. I want to make sure that they know how good I am. And, then what use turning the prayer wheel, okay? There's no virtue in your mind. So the idea of the prayer wheel is that you imagine that there's light radiating from the syllables of the mantras and prayers in the wheel, and that light carries your virtuous intentions out into the world and it touches other living beings. So that by the power of what you're thinking, your mind becomes virtuous, and that becomes a cause for happy rebirth, liberation, and enlightenment. Okay, so this is a question saying, what happens if a person who is learning Dharma develops misunderstandings towards their Dharma teacher and does negative actions towards that Dharma teacher, and as a result they create a lot of negativity. And so how can they get out of, the person said here, how can they get out of the lower realm that he's in now? So I'm not sure if this person is referring to somebody who died and is in a lower realm, but you don't know for sure that they're in a lower realm. Or if they're just referring figuratively to the mental state that is very filled with anger. In general, like I was saying, that those beings who teach us the Dharma are showing us a kindness that is very special and very rare that others don't show us. And so it's important for us to appreciate that and to cultivate positive feelings and thoughts towards those who teach us the Dharma. But we are sentient beings and we're filled with negativities, and so sometimes we misunderstand our teachers, or we project faults on them that they don't have, or we see things that they do that we don't like and we get angry and upset about it. So all of this actually harms our own practice because our mind is filled with negativity, and when our mind is filled with negativity, it's clearly not filled with virtue. Okay? And also because when we have this kind of negativity towards our Dharma teachers, we also tend to push away the teachings that they gave us. And that's what becomes especially detrimental, because then instead of practicing the teachings of virtue, we begin to have a lot of doubts, and we lose faith in the Dharma, and we stop practicing. And that kind of behavior is very, very damaging to us. So it's important, if we have negative feelings towards our Dharma teachers, that we really look in our own mind and say, well, why do I have these feelings? Where are they coming from? Okay? And it does happen, because not all Dharma teachers are perfect. Sometimes a Dharma teacher may, have unethical behavior. It's a horrible thing when that happens, but sometimes it does happen. So if a Dharma teacher has unethical behavior, you can still respect that person for having helped you in the Dharma, but you keep a distance from them, okay? You don't have to be angry at them, but you keep a distance, even though you appreciate that they did teach you in the past. Now you're also going to go study with other people. But sometimes when we look, we see that our bad feelings towards our Dharma teachers aren't because they did something unethical, but because they're not what we want them to be. And sometimes we want our Dharma teachers, we want them to always love us and praise us and tell us that we're the best students that they've ever had. Don't we? Don't we? Wouldn't that be nice if your Dharma teacher always said, "You're so good, you're the best student I have, you're the model for everybody, you're so kind, you're so good at this, you're so good at that." We want to hear that kind of praise from our Dharma teacher. But sometimes our Dharma teacher says, "You made a mistake, and you're angry, and you were rude," and then we go, "What are you saying that about me, You're a Dharma teacher, you're only supposed to see people's good qualities and praise them. Why are you pointing out my mistakes?" Yeah, and we get really defensive and angry. So when we see that our bad feelings are a situation like that, then we know that it's our problem. Yeah, it's our problem. Because actually, when our Dharma teacher points out our mistaken actions, they're usually doing so out of a kind motivation, so that we can see that we're doing something inappropriate, correct our behavior. Because if our Dharma teachers just ignored our bad behavior and let us continue creating negative karma, is that kindness on their part? That's not kindness, is it? It's much kinder if they point out our bad behavior so that we can change it and stop creating that negative karma. Okay? When we understand this, then when our Dharma teachers point out our faults, we say thank you very much because we realize that what they're doing is benefiting us. Okay? Okay, so somebody's quoting some High Lama, I don't know who said, "This body is not mine, I'm not caught by this body. I have not been born and I will never die." Okay, so they're saying, what does this person mean when they say this? Okay, so when they say, this body is not mine, okay, is your body you? Is your body you? Your body's not you. Is there a solid, concrete you that possesses your body and says, this is mine? Is there? Is there a solid person, a soul, a truly existent person that exists independent of everything else that says, this is my body? There's no such person, okay? A person exists by being merely labeled independence upon a body and mind, but there's no independent person there to possess a body and call and say, this body is me or this body is mine, okay? When you say, I'm not caught by this body, the same way, and we'll come to this a little bit later in the chapter, that we don't have to be trapped by our body. Yeah, when beings have very high spiritual realizations, they're not trapped by their body. Yeah, they can. Their body might get old and sick and die, but their mind is not unhappy about it. Okay, that's different from us ordinary beings. We get sick and we complain. We get old and we go, I don't want to get old. I better dye my hair and have a facelift and, do something different. Okay? But a highly realized being is not caught by their body in that way. When they say, I have not been born and I will never die, well, actually, if there's no inherently existent self, then there's no independent self that is born, and there's no independent self that dies. And that's actually true for us, too. It's not just a realized being, but the difference is that we think that there really is something that is us. We think there's a real me inside of here, and that's our own ignorance. But when we're able to realize that there's no independent self, then there's so much freedom, because then there's nobody we need to protect. There's nobody to get offended. There's nobody that gets afraid. There's nobody that is born. There's nobody that dies. There's simply a conventional self that exists by being merely labeled, but there's no findable self at all. Okay, so this person is saying that they read that schizophrenia is the experience of a shattered soul. And so what do I have to say about schizophrenia and depression? Is it possible to become well? And what can we do to heal our soul? Okay, well, before I answer the question directly, from a Buddhist viewpoint, we don't use the word soul. Okay? Soul is more a term and a conception that applies to Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism, those kinds of religions, where they think that there is an independent person there. There is a soul, something that's separate from the body and mind. Buddha, this was one of the revolutionary teachings of the Buddha, is that there is no independent soul or self. Okay? Now, getting to the question of schizophrenia and depression in particular, okay, I think that those mental states can be the result of negative karma created in a previous life. Sometimes they say that there could be some spirit harm, particularly with schizophrenia, but sometimes it could also be due to a chemical imbalance in the brain, and if the person takes the proper medicine, prescribed by a doctor, then people can live fairly, regular lives. That's particularly for schizophrenia. I think it is possible to heal from these things, especially if we do purification practices. And with depression, I think one way to heal is by doing purification practice and by doing the practice of rejoicing, okay? By contemplating our precious human life, by thinking of our Buddha nature, by thinking of the kindness we've received from others, by thinking of the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. All those meditations can be very helpful for uplifting the mind and helping us to see that there's a lot of goodness in life, and we also too have a lot of goodness. Okay? So there's a lot of questions here. I won't be able to answer all of them. I apologize. There's somebody here asking questions about the bardo and somebody who's dying appearing as a butterfly, and I have no idea. Whoever this is, I'm sorry, I really can't give good answers for your questions, so let me try another one. Okay, so how can I advise someone who is not Buddhist to stop having jealous feelings for her loved one? Although I already advised her to battle jealousy by feeling happy for her friend, she can't do it. Well, there's lots of times and lots of situations where we can see somebody else's difficulties very clearly, and we can give advice, but that person is not yet ready to change. And this can be very frustrating because, we care a lot for our friend. They're suffering from jealousy. Maybe they're being very possessive of their loved one, and actually the jealous feeling and the possessiveness are causing difficulty in their relationship. Yeah, because often if one person is possessive and jealous, the other person doesn't like it very much. So, you know, sometimes we may see a friend falling into these kind of mental states and give advice, but that person is very stuck in their negative emotion. And so at that time for us, we just have to be patient, you know. We can still continue to give the advice, talk to them about the disadvantages of jealousy, because talking about the disadvantages of jealousy and the benefits of rejoicing, you know, you can do that. Somebody doesn't have to be Buddhist to understand that. That's just basic common sense, you know. So you can just talk in ordinary language and encourage them to rejoice or to let go of the jealousy also for their own good, so they aren't so miserable, because jealousy makes you pretty miserable. But if that person can't seem to do it at that moment, if their mind is really stuck, then we just have to be patient with them and keep the door open and make prayers and send them love and compassion, and hope that one day they'll be able to realize the disadvantages of their way of thinking and their behavior, so that they can let go of it. Yeah. In other words, we can't fix everybody's problems. And the thing is, what's more important is to fix our own. Yeah. Because it's very easy to see everybody else's problems, but the real problems we have to fix are these ones, the ones inside here. Okay? Okay, so we're going to conclude for this evening. I want to just have a little dedication before we actually end. And because we'll be having a series, you know, these 4 nights, then please think about what you heard today and try and put it into practice. So think about developing equanimity towards everybody. Think about how everybody wants happiness and doesn't want to suffer. Spend a little time practicing rejoicing at others' virtue and fortune. Okay? So do that tonight and tomorrow. Yeah, and then that will really be a help for you when you come to teachings tomorrow night, because you'll already have some familiarity with what was covered. And like I said, if you want to invite any of your friends to join in, that's fine. They'll be able to catch on. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.